In this lesson, we're going to take our P's and Q's, do synthetic division, and find all of the roots that are in an equation. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is find one root by synthetic division. And you might have to try a bunch of numbers. You need your remainder to equal 0. Okay, that's your goal of this. Continue finding roots and dividing until you have a second degree polynomial, meaning like 2x squared or x squared, something that you could factor. Then you could use either of these methods to solve the rest of them. You could factor, or you could use the quadratic formula. Okay, so this is going to be tough stuff. There's a whole bunch of parts to this. So let's break it down. Okay, step 1. First, I need to find my P's and my Q's. So my P value. My P is the constant. The constant is -1. What things multiply to give us -1? Plus or minus 1. Our Q value. Q is 2. So plus or minus 1. Plus or minus 2. Now I need to find P over Q. So P divided by Q is 1 divided by 1, which is 1, and 1 divided by 2, which is 1/2. So we have 4 choices. We could use 1, -1, 1/2, and -1/2 to solve this. That's step 1. Step 2, synthetic division. Okay. So because I know the answer, I'm going to tell you one that works. Not all of these will work. Some of these are going to give you a remainder. But you're going to do synthetic division. 2, 1, -2, -1. You're just going to drop down the coefficients of this. And I know that -1 is going to work, so we're going to use that one. Remember, we always drop down our first, multiply by the number inside the box. -1, multiply to get +2. Or that's going to give me a +1, sorry. That's going to give me -1, 1, and 0. Remember, this is our remainder, number, x, and x squared. Okay, so now what you have is you have 2x squared minus x minus 1. So that's something that we know how to do. So our new equation, we want to do either factoring or we want to do the quadratic formula. So this one is an easy one to do long method. You could always do the quadratic formula because it works 100% of the time always. So remember, we're using 2x squared minus x minus 1. Okay, so we're multiplying a times c. What multiplies to give us -2 that adds to give us -1? Well, our factors that are going to do that are -2 and +1. So remember long method. I drop down my first, I drop down my last, and in the middle, I put -2x and +1x. Okay, then I'm going to group these guys and say what's in common. Well, 2x is what's in common in the first one. If you take a 2x out, you're left with x minus 1. Now, on the next one, the only thing I can take out is a +1 to be left with x minus 1. So the last step that you have to do is set these factors, 2x1 equal to 0 and x minus 1 equal to 0. This one is going to give us -1/2. This one is going to give us +1. The last thing you're going to do is you're going to list all of your roots. So your roots are the one that worked, the -1 that came from the blue. That's your first root. Then your other roots are -1/2 and 1. And how do you know that you have the right number of roots? It should match your highest exponent. We should have had 3 roots, and our highest exponent was 3, so we know that we have enough and that we're done. All right, let's look at another one. Same thing here. So, step 1, P's and Q's. P's and Q's. My P value is -1, so plus or minus 1. My Q value is 4, so plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4. Okay, so when you do P divided by Q, you're going to get plus or minus 1, plus or minus 1/2, and plus or minus 1/4. So you have 6 choices. 1, negative 1, 1/2, negative 1/2, 1/4, and negative 1/4. So we want to do synthetic division with it. You might have to try all 6 of these before one of them works. Okay, so drop down my coefficients, and I'm going to use negative 1. So that's going to be 4, negative 4, 3, negative 3, negative 1, 1, and 0. Remainder, number, x squared. So now we have 4x squared plus 3x minus 1. Okay, next step, factor. Or you could do the quadratic formula, but the long method is going to work for this. You have 4x squared plus 3x minus 1. So I say what multiplies to give me negative 4, that adds to give me 3. Well, the things that are going to do that are 4 and negative 1. So I'm going to drop down my first, I'm going to drop down my last, and in the middle I have 4x and negative 1x. Remember, we solve this by grouping, so I get 4x, and I'm left with x plus 1. Here I need to take out that negative sign, so I'm going to take out a negative 1 to be left with x plus 1. Last step is we're going to set these factors equal to 0. So this one is going to be 1/4. This one is going to be negative 1. Last step is to list your roots. Okay, looking at your highest exponent, we should have had 3 roots total. Our first one comes from this. Our second and third one are our green numbers that we solved for. So we used our P's and Q's to help us find all of these roots to go along with this.